welcome back to a Gaming with Spoons review. We are going to be reviewing Yakuza Zero. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into it. One of my biggest concerns with Yakuza starting off the bat, and why this was a series I never thought I'd be able to get into, was because of how it was only subtitled in Japanese. I do tend to read at a slower pace, so sometimes if the dialogue isn't read or I can't stop the dialogue, it does become a problem. This wasn't a problem in Yakuza because most of it did have the option to be able to hit the X button to pause it if there was a lot of dialogue. I was able to read it fairly fast. When you had the cinematics, they spread out the dialogue enough, it wasn't really hard to keep up and read. So that was a very nice touch, and if that is something you're concerned about, do not worry, you won't have a problem keeping up. Now with that being said, let's talk a little bit about Yakuza Zero's story and what's actually going on in the plot. So you play as two characters in Yakuza, Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima. Now Goro Majima and Kiryu's stories eventually do end up coming together, and I'm not going to spoil exactly how that happens, but a setup of what's going on. You start the game out as Kiryu, and he's tasked with collecting a debt from this guy or whatever for one of the loan sharks in the area, and he ends up beating the shit out of this guy at the beginning of the game. So this, of course, in turn, he goes back to the headquarters, only to find out that the person that he had just got the money from ended up dead, and they suspect that he has been framed for whatever was going on, and how this kind of all plays out. So Kiryu, trying to eventually clear his name because he doesn't want to go to prison, ends up leaving the Yakuza and becoming a citizen, so he can in turn kind of do his own investigations to try and clear his name. This, of course, ends up leading him to a group called the Tachibana Real Estate, where he ends up working with them to track down who it is who owns the empty lot, which, mind you, goes for $1 billion, or 1 billion yen, because it is a huge chunk of land that whoever controls it basically controls the city. It's you have the Yakuza basically starting a war over this small little square of land. It's pretty ridiculous. But then, of course, our story switches over to Goro Majima. Now, Majima's story starts out with him being in a cabaret club that he owns, and he is trying to pay off a debt. So he ends up paying this guy named Sagawa this money or whatever, and he has to keep building up profit to give this guy. His plans are to make it back into the Tojo clan and be a part of the Yakuza. So that's kind of what is going on there. Of course, Majima is given this condition. Look, you kill this person named Makoto Makamura, you're going to be able to have your name cleared, you're going to be able to be put back in the Tojo clan, just do this for me. So Majima goes on a goose chase. He eventually finds out who this Makamura is, and it wasn't the guy that he thought it was. It instead turns out to be a blind girl who just seems as innocent as can be, and it's like, why does she have to die? Why is he supposed to kill her? And then his story kind of plays out as they try to unravel the mystery behind who's trying to kill her and why. It's all very interesting. It's a very deep, dark story. There's a lot of horrible people that you encounter. A lot of the Yakuza, they're clearly just in it to kill. The story can be very overwhelming at times. And this is where a lot of the side content comes in. Because Yakuza you can do karaoke, you can do dancing, you can play mahjong, you can go to the arcade and play some old arcade games. This has quite a few mini games that you can go out and do. Definitely ways to kind of break up and have the humor of the game. You, of course, have side quests as well that also are little side stories. They don't really add per se anything to the game, but they do feel like they're in there to at least kind of build the world of what's going on. Some side quests are definitely darker than others. One such example, one that I thought was really, really dark, is you'd have this when you're playing as Majima, you have this little girl who's standing in front of the arcade. Well, after visiting her 3 or 4 different times, she keeps wanting all these different animals from the arcade. So Majima goes in there, you use the crane machine, you grab the animals, you take them to her. Well, after the 4th time of doing it, the little girl's in tears. And of course, you see the stuffed animal just basically ripped to shreds. Well, what it was is there were members of the Yakuza who did that and who were basically trying to capture her mother because she owed money to them. They were trying to sell her out for prostitution. They even commented on being able to sell the daughter out for prostitution as well. So it was a very dark side quest, and just that's not the only one that I encountered that was really, really dark. And then, of course, you have some that are more lighthearted too, where you're trying to get a couple to, or this girl to solve a puzzle, a crossword puzzle, so this other guy can propose to her. And there's a couple of other things, where you help lovebirds, things like that. And there's just some other really weird ones, like the dominatrix side quest, where you literally teach this girl how to show authority in a submissive relationship so she can be able to keep her job as a dominatrix. And that whole scenario was just really weird to begin with. Let's talk about its gameplay, its combat, because there's not really, outside of its mini games, there's not really a whole lot going on with this combat other than it being a typical beat 'em up. But what kind of stands apart from this beat 'em up is Kiryu and Majima. They all three of them have different styles of fighting that they can use. Each fighting style has its advantages and disadvantages, has its moments she'll want to use it and others that she'll want to use the others. I mean, if you're going to play this on a harder difficulty too, you're going to have to become accustomed to all the different fighting styles. To be completely honest with Kiryu, I did like switching between the rush fighting style and the beast mode fighting style. Rush is more of a fast-paced kind of combat, easy to evade your enemies. Beast mode is more of a very brutal fighting style, but in turn Kiryu moves very slow. So I found a combination, kind of being able to use both to my advantage. When it came to Majima, the two I really enjoyed playing around with, and for the life of me I can't remember what it was, but Majima has this kind of dance style one where he goes around and punches, he sits there and spins around. It's almost like break dancing in a way, where he incorporates that into his fighting style. That was the one I used. I also used his slugger style a lot, where he used the baseball bat. That was actually the one that I used most with Majima, just because it fit to my play style, and it was really fun to play. I also kind of liked the over-the-top brutal nature of that particular fighting style. But throughout the course of the game, you do come across different types of enemies. As I said, you'll have to kind of learn to use the different fighting styles to your advantage. You can also pick up items and beat people with them, and kind of go from there. You can equip weapons, and that's not really a fighting style. You just kind of use the specific weapons to go in and actually take down some enemies, and it kind of goes from there. You also have the ability to be able to go in and level up Majima and Kiryu by collecting yen. When you collect yen, you apply those to your abilities, and you can kind of grow them as characters. This almost kind of plays out a lot like the sphere grid from Final Fantasy X. The best way to kind of go in and explain this, that's really what it feels like. It even has little things that are locked behind there. You kind of have to go in and eventually unlock, of course, through doing training with the people you do go through the game and learn those fighting styles from. Now, the last thing I really want to bring up with Yakuza Zero is its soundtrack. A lot of times its soundtrack is not memorable, it's not great. I wouldn't even really say it has that many amazing songs, but there are a few moments going through this game that the music just knows how to hit the right spot. The composer really thought through, okay, how can I immerse the player, what's going on? So there's a lot of build up to a fight with different Yakuza members, and the music will kind of start to build up and play into something really getting you pumped for this fight. There's also, of course, some other times there towards the end of the game where things start to get really emotional, a lot of things are really going down, and you have your character who is able to go in and kind of cut. Where you have a lot of emotional stuff going in towards the end of the game, and the music's kind of able to go in and really convey the emotion. You know, the piano, the guitar riffs on some of the songs just really set the mood in, and they sound really, really good. They were some of my favorite moments from the game because that music just helped add to the emotion. So there's a lot going on with the soundtrack there. Now, let's hop right into it. Let's give this an official score. I am going to give Yakuza Zero an 8 out of 10. An 8 out of 10 for having some really fluid combat, a really great story, some really memorable characters, and just its outright over-the-top nature. If I had to pick one gripe about this game that I did get burnt out by doing a lot of the different side content and getting caught up in going through the completion. I eventually just had to stop and make myself go through the story. This is a game I do not recommend sitting down and trying to 100% everything in one sitting. Otherwise, you are going to burn yourself out on this game. But overall, Yakuza Zero was a very satisfying, very pleasing experience, and I would recommend it to anybody who wants a quirky, weird, Japanese-style game with a very serious story. The story seriously is worth playing through this game alone. This has been my official review of Yakuza Zero. Be sure to hit subscribe there for me to keep up to date with all of my content and check out my latest reviews so you can keep up to date with all of my latest reviews. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Links are going to be down below in that description box. You guys have been watching Gaming with Spoons, and most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out.